Thank you. And Director Williams, I want to follow up from where that last question was. I guess my first question was going to be, are wildlife crossings eligible under existing interior programs? And I think you answered that, but if you would just kind of flesh that out.
Thank you for asking that, Senator Capito, because wildlife crossings, this program through Bill is incredibly important to the Fish and Wildlife Service and Interior for wildlife crossings, because while we have other programs and can put money toward crossings, we use those programs for other services as well, and the funding available is very small compared to what's available through this grant program that's specific to wildlife crossings only.
Okay, and when we talked earlier in the week, and I appreciate the phone call, and you mentioned it again, I expressed a lot of surprise that a federal agency was getting a grant from another federal agency. Sounds a little conflicted to me. How do you see that from your perspective? And I understand, do you review these applications? Or they're all reviewed over at Highways?
So very good question, Senator Capito. And actually, after speaking with you, I looked into this further and had some similar questions. This is why we did not consult more with federal highways as you were putting the program together. We consulted some, but we do not sit on the grant review process because we would not want to review where we have applications for the grants themselves. So we helped coordinate early on, but after that have been very careful to leave space between that and not seem like we're looking at our own grant proposals. Right.
So, Mr. Fauci, let's talk about that. Were there other agencies, federal agencies, that applied for these grants of the 19, or is that the only? Is that one of the 19 that you talked about?
Yeah, these grants were available to all federal land management agencies, so it was available to other agencies. And
did anybody else apply? Any other federal agency that you can recall? Or were they granted? Maybe that's a fairer question. Since
the U.S. Fish and Wildlife was the only grant for them, for a federal agency. The National Park Service, I do recall there were some applications from the National Park Service, but none of those were awarded.
Okay. I don't, that sounds strange to you? A federal agency giving grants to a federal agency? As an appropriator, that sounds strange to me, because I'm like, well, why don't we just appropriate into the pocket that the director would use, rather than have one federal agency apply to another federal agency?
If I could just interrupt, I think well, I don't want to prolong this, but the idea of why does this make sense? You know, it was just common. My dad used to talk to me, my sister, all the time. Just use some common sense. Maybe this is a common sense situation, but I think the senator's raising a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so we talked too about interagency coordination. So, Mr. Fauci, what other, you mentioned a couple, Park Service, is Forest Service, somebody else that you coordinate with? What other agencies are you in a coordinating capacity as you're moving through these programs? So we're not duplicating here. Yeah.
Yes, of course, and thank you, Senator, for that question. So we've sent out invitations to consult on developing our products, and with the Wildlife Crossing Program, with the transportation wildlife communities, we're talking about members of tribes we've consulted with, state DOTs we've consulted with, state fish and wildlife agencies, and again, we can get consultation back from them on the notice of funding, but the other products that we are working on that doesn't have the interest of them applying for a grant. We're working on those products with agencies like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but also we're talking to colleges and universities as well to get feedback on this program. ASHTO is another organization we're working with, because best practices is a big part of this program as we move forward with. So that's a few of the agencies that we've been reaching out to.
Let's talk about, I mentioned this in my opening statement, on the the application projects and actually getting the projects out, not just out the door, but out the door and fully constructed. So what are you doing to streamline that?
Thank you, Senator, for that.
Project grant agreements.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, as you know, yesterday, we made the announcement.
Right.
For the awards. And some of the things that we're doing there is that a lot of these projects are going to be administered by the state DOTs and so forth. So a lot of the award agreement templates that we put together with these groups, we are streamlining those efforts to help us get those awards out the door quicker. We have also established some programs within our agency. We've established a discretionary grant program team just to help us in administering these grants quicker as well. So those are just a few of the things that we've been doing to help streamline the process.
And then is the accountability on the back end in terms of how long it's taken? Were you able to do the project that you said you were going to do, all of that? I'm sure you do that sort of accountability as the projects are finishing.
Yes, Senator, that's correct.
Well, I have a deer that comes in my yard all the time and eats my hosta. So, you know, anything I can tell that deer to get out of my yard and cross back into the neighbor's yard, I really need that. Thank you. Yes, thank you. I have one final question for Director Williams, and we've talked a lot about the Elkins Field Office in West Virginia, but it's my understanding that they have a detailee from the U.S. Forest Service. Your staff has indicated that this has been very helpful in managing the backlog of Section 7 consultations, but that the process to execute the memorandum of understanding to secure a detailee can be very lengthy and complex. And I was wondering if you had any recommendations as how those processes could be expedited.
Thank you, Senator Capito, and I also want to just recognize my appreciation in working with you on these issues and your leadership. It's been very helpful in highlighting and bringing forth the challenges at the Fish and Wildlife Service, where we have had declining capacity in staff and yet ever increasing numbers of consultations coming in. And we've tried to streamline through the IPAC system, which really has made an enormous difference. In some instances, it's been a 98% of the consultations can go through IPAC and they can do it on the computer and move on. For the remaining consultations, which is your question, how do we streamline having the staff there? And as you know, we've done that through a combination of ways. We would like transfer authority because that helps us with federal agencies, and that it may have taken a little bit to get in place, but they can last longer. And it also helps to have those, have people from the agencies we're working with then know the process. So one way is through the transfer authority, which we are seeking, and then the other is through these reciprocal agreements, which we have used often with external parties. So those are two tools that we use, but I would say if we had better capacity within the Fish and Wildlife Service to have adequate staff for consultations, we could do more as well.
So let's talk about the transfer authority issue. Is that transfer, tell me how that works, the transfer authority issue within your Fish and Wildlife?
Well, Senator,
Well, it's not working, I know, because you don't have the transfer authority now, but how would that work?
we do, yes, thank you, Senator Capito, and I was smiling because I realize the challenge, you know, of moving money from one federal agency to another.
Right.
This would set up an agreement with another federal agency where we have the agreement ahead of time to have staff working on consultations for that agency.
Okay, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.